This is Hightower's Guide to Writing a Successful Essay, Part 3, the Thesis Accurate Evidence Connection. First of all, understand that the purpose of FSA Writes is to prepare students for life. You have to be able to think through different situations that will come to you in life. Choosing a college, voting in elections, choosing a career, buying a home, moving to a new city, choosing a spouse. How does the FSA connect to that? Well, we need thinking citizens. So thinking citizens won't buy a home without doing the research, choose a career without doing the research, moving to a new city without gathering research, choosing a spouse without dating, watching, gathering evidence on whether or not this person will make a great addition to your family, voting in elections without doing the research on the party, on the person. The FSA shows whether or not you are prepared to be a thinking citizen. In college, you're going to write essays. School is designed, whether you go or not, to prepare you for college. You write essays in college. Well, you have to know how to write a research paper. How do you do that? So what's the connection with the FSA Writes? How do you start successfully? What's now? Well, remember what is it that you need in order to choose a college, vote in elections, a career, home, new city, spouse. You need evidence. You need evidence. Now, you have your thesis. We've already worked on that. So you have your thesis. What's the next step? Well, remember the focus of the thesis. Stay focused on one issue. I know many teachers have told you to have 3 points. That's difficult to argue in a 2-page paper. That's built for a 5-page college essay. For the sake of the FSA, choose one point you're going to argue, and then you gather evidence. So the purpose of this essay is about the evidence. The evidence wins debates. So the truth is, this essay is going to show how smart you are. A lot of kids get relaxed, they show up, they write, they don't realize that the FSA is an intelligence test. Are you smart enough to assert a claim, use evidence to prove it, and explain the connection? Remember, if you begin to think of this as writing a research paper instead of an essay, you'll be more successful. How do you do that? Well, once you get your thesis, you need to have a planning sheet. You got to gather the sources. You have your thesis, which is your question and answer. Now it's time to find sources to support your thesis. You want to use varied sources, 3 sources to prove your 1 point, strong. 2 sources, acceptable. If you only have 1 source, it's a weak paper. It won't be successful. Now that you have your sources, what do you do with those? You tell what those sources say, what they mean, and why they are important. Say, mean, matter. That's the whole function of your paper. You take each piece of evidence. You have 3, so 3 body paragraphs. 1 paragraph, you tell what does this evidence say, what does it mean, why is it important. The second paragraph in the body, what does this evidence say? What does it mean? What does it matter? Remember, you're only supporting that one position you claimed in your thesis. You're not trying to do 3 pieces. A stronger essay will have 1 point that you use several pieces of evidence to support rather than having 3 positions with only 1 piece of evidence for each. That's a weaker paper. I strongly suggest you take 1 claim and use 3 pieces of evidence for that 1 claim instead of trying to have 3 different parts of your claim. As you've been taught before, you know to do the evidence, you have your assertion, you cite evidence, and you explain it. That's called your commentary formula. Let me expose the game. Most of you know how to write an assertion. Yep. You know how to cite your evidence. Yep. The explanation, not so much. That's where people fall. The explanation separates the weak from the strong. The weakness, most writers don't know how to explain. So when you are explaining in your commentary, how do you do it? Well, the first thing you do is you show you know what the evidence is saying. Then you show you know what the evidence shows us in relation to your answer or your claim. And finally, in your paragraph, you explain how this evidence connects to your thesis. You have to stay focused on your thesis. Why is this information important in relation to your thesis? Keep going back to your thesis, to your claim, to your promise. Now, in the conversation, when you are in the commentary, join the conversation. You need to add insight. Show you're smart. Everybody isn't good at this, okay? Your score is going to show it. You can think by making connections or you can't. We need people in strong careers. This is why elite colleges use top scores from essays like this to allow people into their college. Schools are afraid to say this, but these tests divide the strong from the weak. Are you strong enough to connect your evidence to your claim? Most people simply summarize it. That is weak and that is lower level when you summarize the evidence, and it's an unsuccessful paper. Strong writers add insight. They think, they show, they explain what the evidence means. What does it reveal? What does the evidence teach? That's your whole paper. It's about your commentary and the evidence. Your commentary and the evidence. Your commentary and the evidence. You are not summarizing the evidence. Anybody can do that. Well, you do it the first when you tell what the evidence says, but after you tell what the evidence says, you have to reveal what it means, why it's important. Finally, putting it all together, you have your thesis, research paper, gather the evidence, explain the thesis. That's what you want to know. So you have your thesis first, understand you're writing a research paper, gather your evidence, and then you simply explain the thesis evidence connection. That's your whole paper. These are acceptable responses. You have your first paragraph, you acknowledge the thesis, you have your sources, you have an opposing view if it's argumentative with a simple conclusion, and you have transitions all throughout. If it's expository, you can have the thesis only. You have your sources, a simple conclusion, and transitions. Now, if you're like, hey, wait a minute, I want a top score. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. A well-written intro, nice transitions, well-written conclusion, revision. That's for top scholars. But in order to pass, this is all you need.